Disclaimer: the We Are One podcast aims to shed light on the abuse experience within the Independent Fundamental Baptist Church. The stories shared are from survivors who bravely recount their personal experiences. It is important to note that unless an abuser has been convicted in a court of law, they are presumed innocent until proven guilty. The podcast does not serve as a legal judgment, but rather as a platform for survivors to share their truth.
Now let's get into today's episode. Here is your host, Olivia.
Welcome back to the We Are One podcast. I'm your host, Olivia. To continue with the Bethel Files series, I am speaking with Micah. Hello, Micah.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Just, surviving long days. But so I guess to kind of get into like the episode, obviously we're talking about Bethel Boys and stuff like that, and Herman Fountain and William Knott and all the craziness that comes with that name. So kind of talk, what kind of made you go to Bethel? Like what sent you there?
Well, in a nutshell, like my parents divorced when I was 8 years old. Apparently I don't remember all the details. I'm 42 now, but I took it really hard. And I always was kind of, very ADHD, very different, very, somewhat defiant, nothing crazy, nothing out of the craziness. At 13, after being put on an experimental medication, my mom was a nurse, so I was on experimental medication for depression, and that experimental medication at the time was called Prozac, and now we know that Prozac and children don't mix very well, and it made me, have suicidal thoughts, which is really common. But she took that as I was just at my wit's end, and what's funny is I found out about this during my first time at Bethel, that they sent people to these parent support groups that parents to go to for support, and they would evangelize themselves about what a great job they do changing your kid for the better, making good, godly men out of your disruptive, out of control child. And my mom was very religious and just thought that was the right way. So she gave me two options, and funnily enough, Bethel was the better of the two options. So at 13, I flew to Mississippi with my mom and got dropped off at Bethel. And the first time I was at Bethel, it was nothing like what we all talk about now. They still had their little corporal punishment. Herman and his son, Herman Fountain Jr., we called him Bubba. They ran things. It was much more simple. There was just the one dorm. It was like 36 of us. It was still strict. It was still getting yelled at, and all the racial slurs being thrown back and forth, and like the things the structure was not the same. It was very much like you were just in a boys' home, but you knew it. And if you followed the simple rules, you'd get upstairs to the bottom bunk, which was like the place you wanted to be. It was simple. You had more privileges. It was easier. It was nothing compared to the time of not being there.
Okay.
So I was there for about 9 months that first time around.
Okay. And so did you go back?
I did. So after I got out the first time, I finished up my 8th grade year, and just kind of, being a normal 15-year-old, dabbling a little bit of beer, dabbling a little bit of weed, dabbling a little bit of, I hated school. I was still kind of on this not great trajectory, but nothing I think that required me to be facilitated into a place like that. But my mom, after I'd, openly talked to a therapist who actually, as an adult realized that he breached my right to privacy. And he told my mom that I was suicidal. I didn't see the world right. I believed things to not be true. Like made me out like I was just this desperate, I needed everything possibly to get help.
Yeah.
Whereas I was just a super depressed kid that was untreated. So my mom told me we were going to Disneyland and drugged me. And I woke up on a plane being told I was going back to Bethel, because in her eyes, that was the best place for me. Her intention was that I would be there till I was 18. She's like, I can't help you. This is where you're going to go. And the funny thing is, so I get there the first day, I'm just out of it. I have no idea what's going on. I find out after I've come home, and it's down the road a little bit, that my mom was like, I knew I should have turned around. When I saw that little kid covered in bruises, I knew I should have turned around and come and got you, but I didn't. And she went back the next day and was like having second thoughts, and Brother Fountain and Joe Instructor not talked her out of it.
So talk about, like you said, you thought you were going to Disney World and your mom drugged you.
Yep.
That's crazy.
With the bounty hunter on top of it. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So
It was
Dave,
a family friend. It was like the perfect storm. We were going to meet my uncle, who at the time lived in Alaska, who would travel through, and we never really saw. And I was going to get to skip the end of school, and I had to take this pill that was going to make my UA show up clean for the medication I was on, so it would show up dirty. And my mom's a nurse, so she knew all the way to kind of work this through. So I'm, popping this pill, thinking, all right, we're going to do great, and suddenly I'm just completely gone, and not realizing that this person who I've known my
yeah,
entire life, is there for me. And I wake up on a plane going to Chicago, and I just wake up and I see my mom and I see this bounty hunter and I lose it. And I'm told, excuse me, I have to calm down on the plane. Like, I'm freaking out because I know where I'm going. I know what's happening. I know exactly what I'm in for. And well, at least I thought I did. And so yeah, I was escorted from there to Louisiana and then all the way escorted to Bethel by that. And
wow.
I didn't come to until the day after to really kind of came home because I got there. I was pretty drugged up still. So like
Yeah,
I knew I was there. I remember like talking to Brother Fountain, like, oh, you're back, and this is why you should never have left because we weren't done fixing you and rah rah rah. I'd take my little tongue ring out, take my earrings out, and do this little walk of shame back to the dorm. But I was in no shape to be anything to them, other than just like tomorrow's a new day.
yeah.
And day one was just pure right out the gate.
So what were some things that you look back and you're like, that's insane that I went through that? What are some things, whether that was Herman Fountain that did them, William Knott,
Oh, I mean, all of it. I
Bell?
mean, the amount of abuse that happened. I mean, you hear about that stuff, and I tell people, and they're like, it doesn't sound real. It doesn't sound like who would do that? Like, I can show you two people at least who would do that.
William Knott is, oh my gosh.
Is an absolute. Am I allowed to cuss a little bit?
Yeah,
He's an absolute piece of shit. He's an
yeah,
absolute piece of shit, and I hope that he gets everything coming to him. He enjoyed every moment of that torture, every moment of making kids scared, sticking his dogs on them, pushing them around. He loved every second of it, every chance he could get. In his eyes, the harder the better. And he would tell us about all the bad things that he does on the outside and blah, 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 like try to make himself like he was some god. It was the weirdest thing, but people always ask, why didn't you leave? Because of him. The absolute fear instilled in you was like, that was like the trauma was already there. Like you knew you
yeah,
weren't going to leave. Other kids, there was other guys that are part of this group that at the time would have gone to get you like that. No problem, no question. They were smart in their eyes and they went and aligned with the other side and were like the favorable ones, the ones that did the boxing, the ones that took care of the dogs, or the ones that treated people the exact same way they wanted to see them be treated. So they're like, hey, this is great. I can totally make this person do what I want.
yeah. And something that's really stuck out the most is, a lot about Bethel, but one of them is the dog situation. And for just, in case for listeners out there, can you talk about the dogs? What would happen with the dogs? What would they make you do? What would
So,
happen?
oh, sorry. I never had to witness the dogs, but you like as far as like someone being physically attacked, at least that I ever saw personally. So I can't say I
Right.
did, but I've just heard more stories from other people about it. But he did raise dogs that he fought. He had a dog he called Head. He had a baby dog he called Diamond. That was two big, really pretty pits, but they were trained to harm people and harm things and harm other dogs. That's where they go to dog fights.
Yeah.
Uh, but I knew the intention. It was definitely a threat. It was always a threat. Get him, Diamond Girl, get him, Head. And she would go start trucking after you. Like you didn't want that because you knew if she latched on, it'd be a minute. But I never personally saw it myself, but I heard it, and it's zero surprise to me that is what it escalated to, even if it hadn't started yet. Because
Yeah.
any type of fear. So, but like using it as like weaponizing the dog as a tool for fear was a big one. He would threaten you. I'll stick my dog on you.
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard that and talked with other Bethel boys, and they have said whether they have experienced it
Mm-hmm.
or they've witnessed it in a way. And I got told like someone, like they would make them get chased, right? And they would have to run around the property and like all that. And I'm like, it's insane. What would you say about Herman Fallon? what would you like if someone comes to
Oh,
you and says,
so many things.
yeah,
I pity him. I really do. He's so in his delusion that he's right. Like there's nothing you could do. After many years of counseling, I got a hold of Herman. I was like, hey, I just want to say that I forgive you. I need you for me. He's like, I don't got time for this mess. He hung up on me. That was like, I got the signal after that. He wants nothing to do with it. As far as he's concerned, just like every other time we got in trouble, he's doing his job. He's doing what he's supposed to do. A little hard love never hurt nobody.
yeah. I saw the interview that he did on 2020, like years ago, and he
Mm-hmm.
flat out was like, "Yep, those bruises should be on them. Those, like, oh, that's not abuse. Who says it's abuse?" And I'll put the clip in here for listeners to watch, but he just has no empathy. He has no emotions. He's very, I feel like
Oh
emotional.
no. He's a sadistic narcissist as far as I'm
Yeah,
concerned. He thinks he's great and he's doing God's work and he's the best thing that ever happened. He's just a swindler. He's a liar.
yeah,
He's a cheat. He cheated every single person out of their money every month so they could send their kids to essentially, change the trajectory of a lot of people's lives.
yeah,
I always wondered how would I have grown up and what choice would I have made if I didn't go through that? What
yeah.
struggles would I not have?
And you struggle with that?
I did. I mean, I spent a lot of time and a lot of money on counseling. I dealt with severe alcohol abuse. I dealt with a lot of just flagrant not caring for myself. I dealt with a lot of just the mental anguish of it. I've got PTSD. I still dream about it to this day, if I do dream at all. I
Yeah.
mean, I have a paranoia about me. I think a lot of people could agree with that have gone through this. It just changes you as a person. I think that if you say that I'm better for it, you're either lying to yourself or you align with the way that they, their brand of fixing people. And that's
Yeah.
great. And some people did, and some people really drank that Kool-Aid and really got into it. And I think would still stand up for them to this day. And there's most of us like, well, that's not really how it went. Maybe it went that way for you. And for some reason or another, you just got so deep into it that you couldn't get yourself out and you just believe it, you've indoctrinated yourself.
Yeah, and that's huge. You see it definitely in these like facilities and places like that where either, you get sent there at 9 and 10 and you just feel like this is like the normal, right? Or 16 and then you get very indoctrinated and you're like, nope, this is like it changed my life and it really didn't change for the best. It just changed for the worse. And
Mm-hmm.
because it changes your ideology and your thinking of life basically and just also probably just looking at human to human, right? Um, what are some rules at Bethel that you look right, and you're probably going to say all of them, but you look back and you're like, these though stand out the most that were probably insane that you had to do.
It wasn't rules because I guess like to me you were there for a punishment, so it wasn't like these crazy rules where you couldn't. There's ones like eyes forward, you can't look at other people. You couldn't. You have to address people certain ways. At least again, in my experience there, the second time, and I was lucky enough to, I got a letter out to my mom, and that my dad threatened to sue her if she didn't bring me home because like you're reading this and you can't understand that. But for me, it was more of the punishments that came from breaking the rules. That was the problem. So I think it was the rules were, in my eyes, fairly simple. You knew how to follow them. But if you fucked up and broke the rules, then the punishment was severe, no matter what
Okay.
it was. A great example, there was a night where they had lights out and we all had gotten worn out that night for, whatever, something. Didn't really need a reason to make us all exercise for many hours. And then we all, they're popping, like, hop in your bunk. And if the lights are out, you were going to get worn out again. So we're all like trying to get undressed and, into our bunks and get our clothes into our bins and everything there right by our beds. And the next morning, I get called out for my name being that has to be on all your clothes, my name being on the outside of my pants. And I was like, this cadet didn't realize I was like that. And I'm pleading my case. And all he's saying is, you're a liar. And I'll show you what I do with liars. So there was one after another 5 different people where they used pugil sticks, which is like, maybe like American Gladiators where they're both up on the big thing and hitting with both sides. They're also like for hand-to-hand combat training, I guess. We use those to, teach me a lesson. And I was just one after another, just ran through, knocked out a couple times, kicked in the kidneys. Like, you just let it go. It was all about just making it worse. I don't, I very, very vividly remember getting knocked into the first time, being on the ground, and just feeling that force against the back on my back. It's being kicked repeatedly. Then I remember getting up and refusing to not get up. I was like, I'm gonna get up. It'll be worse if I don't get up. And every time I got up, it was a new person coming in, just charging me, and boom, one knockout after another. You come back to, go for it again 5 times to teach me a lesson about to being different, but having my name on the outside of my belt. So like, it wasn't the rules. It was always the punishment, at least in my opinion. It was always the punishment. I'm sure there were some stupid ass rules they came up with to make it impossible not to break, but it was always the punishment. And especially, the first time around, you get licks and like, ooh, okay, you get licks, your butt heals, you're fine, whatever, happens to all of us. The second time around is just like, I totally was like, I don't want to break a single rule. Like, I would over iron my clothes because I wasn't great at it, to make sure the creases were right so I wouldn't get called out and get worn out again. Like, it was enough to instill fear in you. And I don't think any one of them wasn't afraid on some level.
Yeah. No, I mean, definitely. I mean, talking with a couple other, Bethel boys, offline, and just them saying like that William Knott would turn the heat up even in the summer and just to wear you out. Like, it would feel like a sauna in there, or just certain punishments in a way of just like running for hours and not even knowing how many miles you're running, but because you have to, in a way, just be tired physically.
Yeah, PT was a big way they used it, but it also, he'd weaponize the other cadets against you, the ones that he had a hold on. He didn't like me at all. I was overweight. I was not in shape. I couldn't do all the exercises he wanted me to do, and I had 2 knee surgeries by the time I was 15 already, and like, well, I couldn't do wall sits. But again, it's always about the punishment, whether it was, the cadets would come in and give you a blanket party and, strap you down to your bed and just, come beat you in your sleep, or, you'd be on night watch and they'd come and just sock you as hard as they can while you're sleeping. And you have 2 choices. You either react and get in trouble, and then it's worse for you from the people coming, or you just act like it didn't happen, lay back down. I chose the latter because, like, I know this game.
Insane. Yeah. It's like, well, what are you gaining though? Like, you know what I mean? And it's like, they're gaining that power.
It's a power trip. Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh,
there was the wall sits when because I remember that so he saw me doing push-ups and he was like, well, those aren't push-ups. I was like, fine. So I had to do 20 push-ups before every single meal. And there was one day where I just wasn't doing satisfactory enough. So he's like, all right. So then you got to do wall sits. I'm like, I can do maybe a minute of wall sits before I'm completely just like falling over. And that's pushing it. So we do that. And then after I've failed multiple times to keep up on the wall sit, he has every cadet go get all the junk food they got from their commissary and bring it on over. And then he's got someone holding me up and he is force feeding me food, saying Twinkies and Ho-Ho, sir. I'm choking. I'm puking all over myself. I am bawling my eyes out. And there's another cadet willingly is cramming food down my throat as hard as he can, putting the puke back into my mouth as hard as he can. And then at the end of it, they finally stop and he looks around and he goes, I want everyone to look at D'Annunzio. He's the reason you just lost your commissary. The one little thing they could get was Mrs. Fountain would go to the Walmart and get you, candy and chips and soda and whatever you could. That was like an old school thing that stayed on. It's something you look forward to. And he took it from him. He weaponized every single person in that dorm against me that same day. Whether he understood it or no, whether they understood it or not, because he's like, make an example out of him. This is why. It's the troop mentality. It's like it never was. It was always the people he didn't like. He picked on the most. When I found out my mom was taking me out early, he took me for a walk and said, you're going to fail because you're not letting us help you. And I want you to know that. He told me that I'm a failure and I'm a quitter and I'm a loser. And I'll be back.
Wow. They love tearing down, whether they're in the IFB. And Herman found, his preaching and ideology was
psychotic at best.
Yeah, psychotic. What was church like for you guys?
I mean, it was pretty stale. It was always Mrs. Fountain playing. At least when, again, I was there, I saw pictures of people playing instruments. That when I was there the first time, we were not allowed to play instruments because we could possibly play worldly music, and that was a huge no-no. And the second time around, I just didn't, it wasn't a thing. At least not yet. But we'd go and we'd all sit on the same side and they'd do their songs and Bubba would wail a couple of old hymns from like the 1940s out. And then he would go up to the pulpit and do his little screamy, preachy thing. And, like we all cared. And like, he was like trying to be this fired up Southern pastor. If you're going to, preach it from the pulpit, yell it from the pulpit. And it's like, no, you're just because you're yelling isn't making it any more prevalent. It's not, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like what you're saying doesn't matter. But it was always stale to me. It was very weird. Like I grew up going to church and I grew up going to churches where like they were more interactive and you at least kind of like wanted to be part of it. This was just meant to be like, you're going to sit and go through it because you're going to hear the word of God, boy, whether come hell or high water.
Yeah.
And his message was always of fear. His message is always of,
that's IFB for sure. That's the Independent Fundamental Baptist.
Mm-hmm.
How I was
preaching hell and the hell and brimstone, fire and brimstone.
Yeah, anything with fear, they love it, and it's like it's so far from the truth.
Correct.
So what? I mean, clearly I have seen tons of photos. But what are some of your like uniforms? Because you talked about like having to have your name out and stuff like that on like your clothes. But what did they look like for you?
Well, again, first time there, you could wear whatever you wanted to. It's going to be anything that was like super worldly or any like weird logos. Second time, they take all your clothes and they went through them. They threw them all away. Everything my mom sent me with and packed for me, they threw all away because all you needed was white t-shirts, A shirts or white beaters as they call, 3 pairs of camos, a pair of boots you can polish, a pair of boots you can work in, socks, and then you had to buy a blue overshirt, and then you had to buy your school clothes, which was like Dickies and an embroidered B on another blue shirt, which I actually was when I first time I was there was when they were starting to make everyone wear uniforms to school.
Gotcha.
But it was always you had to be pressed. You had to have your creases in, and if your creases were wrong, you get worn out for it, and then you have to do it over again. And again, like I told you, I was terrible at it, so I was like starting to the point where it'd stick out about this far from my leg because I was like, you're going to see that crease, and once you find out that crease is still not good enough, and there's nothing that's good enough. But the uniforms were not, again, to me, it was so low priority about what we had to wear, how it had to go. It was just like, if you didn't have money, you got secondhand stuff. And then you got in trouble for being secondhand. you get the pants and tear in, and then you get the tear in the pants. And now you're in trouble for having a tear in your pants. And then, well, now Miss Fountain's going to have to go sew that up for you, boy. You have to make up for it somehow. I'm like, okay, sure.
How many, so I know like he has a son and I know his daughter was also on teen torture, but how many other kids did he have?
When I first there, the first experience his kids was, I know he had an older daughter in Louisiana. The son that went on to defend him, the older one, John, whatever. I met him and actually he was kind of a cool dude. The first time I met him, he was a pretty chill guy. I knew of him. I know of, obviously, and I knew Josh and all the kids under Josh because they were all living on the compound still. But I'm not sure how many kids he has. I know he has many.
Yeah. What are some things, I guess, if a parent is looking into one of these facilities, because they're up and running still as of 2025, what are some red flags you would tell, from a parent to a parent about these facilities, what to look for if they want to?
Don't do it. There's no guarantee. Don't do it. People get power, they abuse it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I heard horror stories from kids coming in from other places at that all spared the details of, but it was gruesome enough.
Yeah.
I actually have an acquaintance that ended up sending her son to a place in Missouri. It's not Mountain Parks. I think they're closed now, but it's a place in Missouri.
Was it Agape?
I'm not sure. I'd have to ask again, but I just remember hearing it and being like, I'm disgusted with you. Like, you knew my whole story and you still went and did that. It's absolutely absurd. There's no good way to say, oh, this might be safe or not. It's not safe. They're not in it to help you. They're not doing what they're doing because they have a compassion for troubled youth who are trying to find their straight and narrow in life. They're doing it because they're terrible human beings that get off on hurting others for money.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
There is no good place.
Yeah, it's $1 billion industry.
Good conversion camp. There's no good conversion camps. They all have one purpose: to ruin you. Like there's nothing good about them. I would fight every inch of my soul to convince somebody otherwise.
Yeah.
to save
Uh,
them the what we've all been through.
yeah, no, I have said that too. Like, I'm like, there's so many other ways around discipline or whatever, than to ever send a child to these facilities, because you just never know. Like, I don't care
Mhm.
if they have cameras and you can check in on them every day. That does not matter.
Mhm.
It just you can't trust really anyone, definitely these facilities, because it's $1 billion industry.
Oh
They're
yeah.
they're getting money, like power hungry, that control, like all of it. They don't care about
Mm-mm.
your child. They're just in it for the money. And like it's very obvious too, as time has gone on, and the way that social media has evolved, and stories, and I know that like social media was not a thing back then, and the resources that we have now, but it's like, it's 2025. Do better, people, right?
Yeah,
Like, stop.
you would think.
Yeah.
But I mean, for a few reasons, right? You see old habits die hard. And there's the reason they're open for a reason. They still have a good flow of people that understand that. And I get it. I have, my son is very much like me. He's a very difficult child. And he's gonna be more difficult the older he gets. He throws hands, he gets real angry about everything. He has a very short fuse, he's super ADHD. Like I get why parents would be like, this is too much for me. But the difference is, I know that at the point I give up is the point I give up on him too.
Yeah.
Because my mom, we talk, all the time. We live really close to each other. She's a big part of my kid's life, and she's like, I can never forgive myself fully for what I did. She's like, I went into it so blindly, and then I feel like I changed you for the worse. I'm like, yeah, I was like, honestly, you did.
Yeah.
Like I always
How
say, that's why I always think, how different of a person would I be without having gone through that, and
Yeah.
what would life have looked like, and what would my outlook look like, and what would my depression level look like, and all the things.
Yeah. Tell me, what was life coming back after Bethel? What was your relationship, obviously, now, like with your mom and stuff like that? But, I feel like talking with so many survivors, and something I've experienced myself with my own father and stuff like that, the resentment, it's like, you knew this, or you knew, like, how, and it's very hard to overcome, right?
Mhm.
And like, it's very hard to look at someone the same, and you don't usually look at them the same, just because it's like really hard. But there's also a lot of ways that you can empathize and like still understand that it is so easy to be brainwashed and vulnerable, and like, talking with so many survivors, there's so many times where they've said, like, my parents are like, I can never forgive myself, right? So talk about what was life though after Bethel for you. What was your relationship with your mom?
So, funnily enough, even after I told her everything, and she didn't actually believe me at first, when I so my father, who was definitely an absent parent, uh, got wind that what was going on, because I was talking to him on the phone, and I was like, "There's things happening here that I can't talk to you about." He's like, "I'll come see you." And then they told him that I was a liar. Because they listened to your call, to I'm a liar. Told him all this stuff, and then they couldn't see me. He actually prompted my mom, like, if you don't get him out, I'm gonna press charges against you for child abuse, because this is clearly happening. He told me it's happening. So she sends me a letter saying she's decided I can come home early. I was supposed to go to a different school in Washington. So that was the caveat. I can leave there, but go somewhere else. I landed fully expecting that I get one day and then I'm going somewhere else. The place didn't have any openings. But she said if I messed up, I would go back to Bethel, no questions asked, until I was 18. And then I was like, I told her everything. And I was like, what do you think now? She goes, I still stand by what I said. If you mess up, you'll go back to Bethel till you're 18. Shortly after that, she felt that she was being called to go be part of missions work from a place that's located in Kona in Hawaii. So she
Oh,
moved us
wow.
all, bought a condo, moved us all there. And I saw it as my opportunity. And I took every dime I had and I flew back to Seattle, and I was homeless. I lived in a broken down camper. I lived in people's rooms on couches until I was able to carve up enough money and convince my dad to pay me the child support instead of sending it to my mom, which, legally is like, I don't have to if you're not in the house. Um, and so I started renting a room. I rented places where I got robbed. I did whatever. Still went to school full time. Still worked a full time job in retail, or wherever, Taco Time, retail, wherever I can get a job at. I was 16, so I needed something. Got myself a car, got myself established, and I got to the point where I didn't need anything from anybody. Like I found someone to sign for my car because I was old enough. I found someone to sign for my insurance because I was old enough. I got my dad to sign off on, secondly, educational wise, emancipating me so I could sign my own papers. I distanced myself. I was like, there's no trust here. There's no nothing. And I had to like put this face on living with her for this time and like going back to school and waiting for this time to be over because I had to finish my school year. And I just made it as long as I could. And the moment I could get out, I left. I was gone. I was out the door. And I just had a very, very fractured relationship with her for a very long time with most of my family. Cause I was like, how could you guys not fight for me harder?
Yeah.
You knew what was happening. But my dad too, I was like, you didn't do any more. You finally got up and did something, but that was it. You could have come got me and taken possession of me if you wanted to. You could have fought for that.
Yeah, for sure.
But I just distanced myself. I went and just did my own thing. I carved my own life. I did whatever I could. I lived foot to mouth or hand to mouth for a long time, and I lived in a little shack on the side of someone's house for a while that had been lightly remodeled. It was their old office, but it worked and it was great. And it was the people that I adore. So it was like a good situation. So I got very lucky that I found places I could land where I either could afford to live that were safe or that I could, find a place that was a good transition to thrive somewhere. But I didn't repair my relationship with my mom until, I would say my mid to late 20s. And that was after years of therapy and having to be able to confront her and be like, I don't understand this. You need to explain it to me like I'm 5. Like it's simple because I don't get it why this would happen after all that. And she broke down and told me where she was at. And I had 2 choices. I can either just still be mad and let her have that power over me and being mad, or I could forgive her to the ability that I am. But you are 100% right. What you said, it does skew the way you see the person. Like
Yeah.
I see my brother and my sister in the way they revere my mom. She's the matriarch now. My dad passed away a while, years ago. So it's like and they weren't together anyway, but like my mom's the only living parent. And I just don't have it. I don't I love my mom to death. I'll still do whatever for her, but I can just as easily turn it off. If that makes sense. Like
Yeah.
it fractured my relationship with her. And that's a hard one. And I can't ever see that coming back to being full. My mom's turning 80, and I'm glad that she's a part of my son's life, and I'm glad that she's able to, have that time with him, and it's important to me that she does. But I just my wife just lost her mom recently, and I wept more than I thought I would, and because she showed me unconditional love immediately from meeting me, and that just stuck with me. And I'm like, I thought about it during her funeral. I was like, would I be this upset if my mom died? Like, how would I feel? Would I be more stoic and be like, well, here we are? Or am
Yeah.
I gonna, feel it and be really sad and have it be what I, in my brain I always thought it would be? And that's a rough thing to think about. And that's your mom. It's the person that half the reason you're here, carried you in their body, gave birth to you, brought you up until you could independently eat. There's all sorts of things. This person that, I spent a lot of time with her. I was the youngest of 3, so I was the last one at home. So it was always just me and her for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And that was a tough one to swallow. That was hard. My mom was my safe place, and then I had nothing at that point. That was really hard for me.
Yeah, that's kind of like with me. My dad always looked I look back at pictures now and I'm like, see, even younger me knew like he was a monster, right? Like something like in photos, I'm always crying if he's holding me every photo. And then like when I'm with my mom, I'm smiling in every photo. She is my safe zone, and
Mm-hmm.
and still to this day. But it is very hard when you emotionally unattached, definitely from a parent. Because like for me, like I struggle with abandonment issues because I'm thinking like you're my parent, I'm half of you. Why, like those emotions, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's very hard, definitely. So I can totally understand on that. And there's been times where I'm thinking, even though I've cut my father out of my life for the best,
Mm-hmm.
for my mental health and stuff, and I always say like he's alive but he's dead to me. I've always thought like, okay, once that day comes, like how am I going to react, really? Like am I going to, like I don't know. And I think it's something that obviously I'll have to navigate, but it's very hard though to also detach because it is your parent, right? And you always
Mm-hmm.
you've probably heard this too. it's your parent, you have to love them, you can't pick and choose your family. It's like, no, you can't pick and choose your family, but you can pick and choose who you want to be around.
Mm-hmm.
Blood doesn't make it okay to be toxic, and that generation, like, it should stop now, so like for me it stops. It sounds like it stopped for you too.
Well, it took a long time, and it took really realizing that what my mom did was out of helplessness, not out of malice.
Mhm.
She felt like she didn't know what else to do, and she thought she
Yeah.
was doing the right thing.
And
And
it's
then
easy to cast a
like the
judgment,
worst.
right? It's
Yeah,
easy to say, oh, if I was this parent, I would have done this. It's like, you don't know that, right? Until you're in
no.
that position. And it's so easy to cast judgment. It's so easy to say, I would have left that. I would have ran away if I was that guy that was at that boy home. It's like, okay, well, you can't run away when the whole town protects Herman Fountain and the police just bring him
Mhm.
back.
But
Like,
so the ones that did run away, I even like it. It didn't. It seemed like it was happening a lot more towards the end, but it wasn't a thing. Like you always heard about runaways, and there was one kid that tried to run away when I was there after he'd fallen off the second story into concrete. Oops a daisy, and shattered
broke
his
broke
shoulder.
his arm.
Paleo, Joseph, yeah.
Uh-huh.
He ran. He was desperate enough to run with a cast on his arm in Alabama and hide for a couple days till he got brought back. But running wasn't ever to me. I always thought you hear people about running and they'd be like, "Shh, stop! Don't talk about that. You get in trouble." The fear was enough for you. Like you knew
Mm-hmm.
you get you're gonna get shot with a tranquilizer dart. You're gonna get brought back by one of these hillbillies in their truck. You're gonna get brought back, and it's gonna be way worse for you when you do.
Yeah.
Like you think it's been
And
bad, and they're gonna make an example out of you, right? It's like the
yeah.
Hunger Games. They're going to town square. They're just gonna execute you. Let everyone see it too to make sure they know who's in charge. You don't
Yeah,
want to be
no,
this
I
guy.
get
You don't
that.
want to move. You don't want to move the earth for 24 hours. Just move one pile of dirt from one end to the other.
Yeah.
210 get 5 gallon buckets. Little things like that, and that's just one part of it. So I think to me, for me, the fear was enough that I there was never even a thought in my mind. I think a lot of
Yeah.
people are the same because I never saw it, and they even had fire watching. You could have left if you wanted to. People tried. They'd be like, "I tried, but I wasn't going to do it."
Hmm. Yeah. Um, to kind of end this episode, what are some, like, you look back, right, and you think, even though it's messed up, it is pretty funny. What are some funny moments, whether that was probably with like another Bethel boy pulling a prank or something like that? I would love to kind of end on a positive, funny note.
I'll be honest. I didn't really have a lot of funny times there. The only thing I can remember is the first time around. Uh, it was a fun time where they were trying to do something fun for Thanksgiving because we were all there for the holiday. And so they woke us up and was one we did capture the flag at like 3:30 in the morning because there was a big back forest area you could run into. So we all did that. It was great because Herman and Bubba got into like a physical fight because they were mad about who each other won. But that was probably the only good thing I can remember out of it, other than the day I got the fuck out of there and went home. There was
Yeah.
nothing. I had no humor there. I just felt numb, and I knew that if I did anything, if I ever tried to have any other spirit other than numb and compliant, that wasn't going to be a good day for me. They did not
Yeah.
like me. It was a very very clear sign. I was one of the unliked, and I did not need to do anything else to stand out. So I was just quiet. I was complacent. They told me to fight, I fight. They told me to not fight, I don't fight. There was times I went to box and just wouldn't do anything. So I wish I had something better to tell you. But
Yeah, no,
for
that's so, and
me,
that's
the
really fun.
positive is that the healing that's happened and the person I am now is not the person that I would
Yes.
have been coming out of there, and that there is hope for that as well. That's
Yeah,
the
I
good
want
note
to
for me.
say that. Yeah. So if there is someone out there, whether they're another Bethel guy or another TTI survivor or just someone who has been abused, that's going through a lot right now. And I will say it's refreshing to hear that even though, you had to go through so much at such a young age and you had to learn it all on your own, be in survival mode in a way, right? You have to, like you said, find a home, find food, find a job, whatever, even at such a young age. And to hear like where you're at now and you have thrived and you've overcome a lot, definitely with therapy. What would you say to someone who kind of feels like they're at rock bottom right now? And what are some probably ways to help that situation?
Well, the beauty is once you're at rock bottom, there's no other way you can go than up. So there's always that. You got to hit rock bottom to do it. Um, Giving in to the want to self-medicate is probably the worst thing you could do. It just makes it worse and it comes out tenfold and you start reliving all the bad things while you're whatever you've done, whatever you've taken. And that was the road I took, and it took me a long time and almost cost me my marriage. So, and it's something I changed over about 3 years ago, but it's still, ask for help. Don't be afraid to get the help. Don't be afraid to stare at your demons. And, it's okay. Stand up to them. They won't run your life forever. The PTSD may stay, but it does get better. Just, when you feel worthless, it means that you just need someone to kind of lift you up and tell you how worth it you are. And that, it wasn't your fault. Nothing you did was bad enough to deserve to get what we got.
Yeah, absolutely. I've always said
no matter where you are, no matter what school you're in, nothing you did deserves the punishments you received.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you said that, because I've said that to so many people where they're like, they think that, well, if I would have done this, if I wouldn't have done this at such a young age, it's like, it doesn't matter what you did. There's no middle ground to abuse. There is no justification to abuse. There's no reason for it at all. And the mindset that, oh, if I would have done this or that, it's like, no, you didn't deserve it. You deserve to be loved and seen and feel safe, not fear and abuse. And no matter what you've done in your past, that should not ever define who you are as a person. If anything, it should refine you and change your future. And at the end of the day, we're not perfect. We're humans. We're going to make mistakes, right? It's about taking accountability and just trying to do better every single day. And that's what matters the most. And so I'm so glad that you said that, Micah. There's been such a great discussion talking about your experience at Bethel and like where you're at now. And it's so nice to see that even though you feel like you probably lost it all at some point, you found it all. And it's great to see you thriving. And like you said, kind of like in the beginning too, life isn't perfect, but neither are we. And we can, rise above anything. And at the end of the day, you went through a lot at such a young age. And so it's nice to see that it is possible. There are better days ahead. So thank you so much, Micah, for speaking on today's episode and kind of just having an open discussion about your experience at Bethel and bringing awareness for anyone out there. And if you are out there that you are a TTI survivor, whether you went to Bethel or if you went to a different facility, I would love to speak with you and keep on bringing awareness. So then maybe there's someone out there in the legal forum that can start changing some things, some regulations, some laws that need to be passed for these homes. And that is my hope and prayer for the future generation.
Amen to that. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. All right. Stay tuned for next week's episode.